You're listening to Across the Pondcast. Cybersecurity rants and war stories from both sides of the Atlantic.
Hello and welcome to Across the Pondcast, a show where we talk and occasionally rant about cybersecurity topics with perspectives from both sides of the Atlantic. I am Tib3rius. I'm joined, as always, by my 1 year older co-host, Mr. Andy Swift. Andy, how are you doing?
I'm good. I am 1 year older than I was when we started this. Indeed. It's flown by. We covered a lot of topics. So, yeah, I think we're due our annual review and a nice big welcome to season 2. I feel like I need some new stuff around my desk. Like maybe I should change my hair for season.
Should have planned for that before we started recording.
Maybe like have new hairstyle or lights. Who knows?
Maybe.
I got none of these things, so it's just me again for season 2. Enjoy.
I mean, most people listen to the podcast audio. They don't watch the YouTube, so
well,
it doesn't really matter.
If you're listening, I've got a new hairstyle for season 2.
They're going to head over to the YouTube, realize you're lying, and then they'll never trust us again.
Yeah. It's just lose. Lose. Right.
Well, the title of today's episode is A Year in Review. It's been a year since episode 1 of this very podcast first aired. We've managed to crank out 26 episodes. But also, it's been a year of some kind of weird cybersecurity happenings, which we'll talk about too. It's just going to be an episode of reflection.
A bit like one of those Friends episodes at the end of a season where they just look back on funny moments throughout the season. It's like a compilation. It's not a compilation.
Clip show.
It's not a clip show.
Clip shows are universally hated.
Yeah, this isn't a clip show.
This is not a clip show. No, this is new content. Don't stop listening.
So we just didn't have enough highlights to make a full clip show. So here we are. We'll just talk about other stuff. Right.
Yeah. But before we start,
this
show is made possible thanks to our sponsors. If you want to sponsor an episode, please send an email to sponsors@acrossthepondcast.net for more details. So, I can't remember when I actually asked you first, Swift, to do a podcast. It must have been in like October of 2024.
A dreamy October 2024. And you popped the question.
I was like, we should do a podcast, Swift. Like, let's do it.
Got down on one knee. It was romantic as hell.
Actually, maybe it was before October. It was like September, October, I feel like that time. We did do quite a lot of planning because we wanted it to, actually be good. We recorded a few episodes that year because, so here's the thing. Like, I know a few people with podcasts. And I talked to a few people. Mostly I talked to narrator, who does the Critical Thinking Bug Bounty podcast. And he gave some really good advice. So mostly it was like, making sure you don't talk over each other, which I feel like we've definitely tried to keep to a minimum. But also one of the bigger pieces of advice was like what platform he suggested we use to do the episodes. And that was like basically they use Spotify. So we use Spotify and it syncs to everything. But having like a few episodes to launch with was a good bit of advice as well. I think we launched with 2 episodes. So it always gives people like who listen to episode 1, they can immediately go into episode 2. It's kind of like a little bit of a freebie. But now, if this is your first episode, you have 26 others to listen to as well. So there you go.
Enjoy. You get to look back on the various stages of like my webcam and microphone quality from like the early days. I was like recording all of those. Do you remember those little old Microsoft microphones that like those little bits of plastic? They looked like a pen and they were just absolutely useless. So it's gone from like those sorts of days all the way through to some nicer stuff.
That was episode 1.
Episode 1.
To be fair, that was only episode 1. And then I was editing episode 1 and I was like, Swift's audio is like, it's just not as good as mine. It just like,
it's terrible.
It wasn't terrible. I was just like, well, we've got some budget because we had sponsors. So I was like, well, let's spend some budget on actually getting Swift to, like, basically the exact same setup as me.
Yeah, I still somehow don't sound as good as you all the time. But then you're the master of audio, so you know.
Yeah, I just tweak you down a bit.
Yeah. It's like when you go to like parents' evening and they put you purposely on like little kids' seats, so just to have that god complex over you.
Yeah, I'm constantly making you sound bad, Swift.
Yeah, thanks, man. I do that on my own quite a lot of the time, to be fair. Yeah, I've learned not to have dogs in the room.
Yeah,
I'm saying that.
The amount of times in the edit, like, there's like a bit where Andy's like, "I'm going to take the dog out because he started snoring."
You might get that again today. He's under the table. He's a little pug.
So you haven't learned?
No, I haven't. I don't learn my lesson at all. He's cozy here at the moment. It's cold, and he's sat here under the radiator next to me, so he's comfortable. But if he starts snoring, there'll be a pause, a slightly disjointed podcast at the end of it. But never mind.
There'll be a pause, and if you're watching the YouTube channel, Andy will shift dramatically in his seat.
Maybe come back with a jumper at the other end of it.
Well, one of the bigger changes that we did in the podcast, because obviously when we started out the podcast, we were like, well, Andy and I used to work together, so we've got plenty of stories from our time together, but also, you know, we've had long careers. 15 years is quite a long time. So we were like, well, we have like plenty of stories of our own. And we thought this would just be like a, us telling war stories podcast and then the occasional topic. And to be fair, it still is. But one of the big changes was when we started having guests on. And I think that was actually, I think, one of our best decisions because we've been able to have far more stories to tell or listen to. So yeah, I'm glad that we have so many guests lined up actually for season 2. It's I keep having to go back to people and say, yeah, we're recording, but we might have to schedule you, next year.
It's a nice problem to have, right? I mean, I think getting guests in was a nice turning point for us actually, because it just gives you that richness of stories from all over the world and from different people. And it's do you know what's like? I think we said it on one episode, I don't know, like ages ago, but the thing that always strikes me about all of these guests we have and all these people talking is that they all have some kind of story that we can absolutely relate to as testers. It's like, it doesn't matter the distances between us, it doesn't matter the sort of slight industry variations we have. Like over and again, you sort of hear the same kind of stories with a bit of a twist, and you're like, oh god, yeah, I've got something similar to that, and it becomes quite a cool conversation because you're like, oh yeah, I remember we did this one time and it's similar to that, and it's just amazing to me that there are so many stories and so many continuous themes that run even across the pond. It's quite funny. But yeah, I've enjoyed all of our guests that we've had on. They've been amazing over the last year. They really have. So shout out to them. And what I have also learned is that no one knows what an Arga is. And I think this is going to continue into season 2. Is my constant questioning about Americans and other people around the world about, do they know what an Arga is? And then spreading my love for Argas and all things culinary based to them.
We should have like an Arga facts section.
or like a quiz. Like we just quiz people on what's the optimal fuel and temperature for an Arga.
we should. That should be a new to season 2. Yeah.
But I need to do some more research on Argas. I just know I like them. They're warm and toasty, but I need to get some facts. I'll put together a fact sheet for next time.
Yeah. The problem with doing this, of course, so this is maybe revealing a little bit about how the show is produced. So this is actually something that was recommended again by narrator, was to have a bunch of shows pre-recorded. And so we generally, at any possible time, have, I think, 4 shows recorded before they're released. And we release every 2 weeks, which practically means there's a 2-month waiting period between when we record a show and when it actually goes to air. But at the same time, sometimes what we've done is reorder the shows. So we've recorded one, and because it's topical, we've sort of bumped it up in the scheduling. That's happened a couple of times. But it also means that sometimes, like, we recorded a show yesterday, that's technically going out after this one. It's just the way the scheduling works. So that's one thing I think that's slightly confusing, because we've got to remember, can't mention anything that happened in yesterday's episode today. No. Continuity.
Season to season continuity.
So, yeah. And in fact, we have a few episodes that we recorded, I think, like over a month ago now, maybe, that are going to be in season 2, just because the scheduling did not work. So, yeah.
Sometimes things...
It's just the way... I mean, it happens, but I like the way we've done it, and I like having a lead time, because it's taken so much pressure off. It's not a case of, we have to record this week because we have an episode that we have to edit for next week or something. It's nice. It's chill. So, yeah.
Cybersecurity is so fast moving as well. So sometimes we've just got to react to stuff that is happening because it's interesting, cool, and we have people coming on the show that want to talk about like the new interesting shiny stuff. And it's like, this isn't a news podcast, this is a stories podcast more than anything, isn't it, really? But sometimes those people that come on with stories, there are things topical that we just have to talk about because they're so big and interesting and it gets people talking, that we got to cover it. It's like the Thumpug one as well. So after that, do have to introduce a new thing that we now do on every episode, which is just making sure that the person we're talking to is not Ali. That's so Tipsy, that is you, right? I'm not another bloody unmasking. I don't need another one of those. I don't need another like blood pressure moment.
We need to get Ali on the podcast this season.
I think she owes us.
And we'll have to check to make sure it's Ali and not Solst.
Yeah, I feel like we're going to set ourselves up for that if we invite her on.
We're onto them. We're onto them. But yeah, I mean, we did think when we were initially planning this podcast, hey, maybe we should have a section for news. But then, like, the way it worked out, it never made any sense because we release every 2 weeks. So even if we'd recorded like a week before release, which we never do usually anyway, like the news is old. Like the news would be 2 weeks, maybe 1 week old by the time it got to our podcast, which doesn't really make any sense for a news podcast. But in reality, a lot of the time it's going to be 2 months old. So yeah, I'm glad we didn't go down that route.
I feel this.
I like that we stuck with the stories and having people on, and then occasionally rushing an episode because it's so important that we're like, you know what, screw it, we'll just bump everything else. So that way works better for us, I think. Okay,
yeah, occasionally it works. You just have to rush it. But there's also like there's so many news-based security podcasts out there, and there are so few people doing just general sit down, have a conversation with interesting people, and that's what I kind of like about it. Like I saw someone else posting on X earlier, and they were like, "Oh yeah, I'm thinking of starting up a podcast." It's like, and then someone asked, "Well, what are you going to do?" It's like news, blah blah blah. Like, okay. It's another one of those. Best of luck to them.
Yeah.
It's just, not really what we wanted to do with it, was it? It's conversational.
Well, that's the thing. Like with news, nobody gets news from podcasts. You get news generally from still like text media, right? Text-based media, whether that's X or like newspapers online.
Yeah,
like that's where you're going to get the news from. What you're gonna get from a podcast is, at least you'd hope, is some kind of opinion. So a news podcast works if you can actually make it opinionated, but or explain the news maybe a bit better and put your own sort of aspect like thing on it. But I think that's the only way news podcasts will work in cybersecurity if you have an opinion. But at the same time, can you really have an opinion about everything? Like. Yeah. I mean, yes, definitely. But can you have a good opinion about everything? Probably not. So yeah.
Damn well try.
You can. Well, with that said, should we talk about the news?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And when we say news, we actually mean the old news. Stuff that happened in 2025 in cybersecurity.
Yeah.
We've selected 3 things. And we're not going to claim that these are the biggest things that happened in cybersecurity. They're just 3 different things that happened. But I think I would say 2 of them made quite a big splash. one of them, I think you just honestly have a personal vendetta against. So it made the list for that reason. But also they are just known for failing quite a lot. So, I mean, we'll leave that one to last, shall we?
Yeah, probably best, yeah.
So we'll start with cloud outages. My goodness, we had a lot of them. So
I know. And I've seen that. I've seen that meme so many times over the last year of like where they've got like all those different like parcels and things like built up, and there's just like this tiny little stick at the bottom. It's just various people relabeling it. I've seen that image way too many times than I would like to have this year, but it's so true. And how I think this year has been like a really eye-opening fact to the rest of the sort of general public about how much duct tape is really holding together this behemoth that is the internet and all the things and services we like to connect to and consume on a regular day-to-day basis. Everyone assumes by now that we've got all of our stuff together and it is as robust and as resilient as hell, and it turns out no, it's actually being held together by Velcro in places. And if the Velcro becomes like unsticky one day, we have big problems, right?
Yeah.
What's your favorite one?
Oh, that's tricky. I mean, can you have a favorite cloud outage? Like, which one annoyed me the most? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I've got two for slightly different reasons. So I've got two favorite outages from this year.
I mean, the Google Cloud. So let me just firstly let me just list the ones that I have. Google Cloud.
Yes,
and this is in order. Was June 12th, which I think was the first major one. I don't think there was one before that. And ironically, I believe also on June 12th, there was a Cloudflare one in my research. But that I don't honestly remember that one. I think mostly because the Google Cloud just took out most of the internet. So I think that was slightly overshadowed. But June 12th, technically Google Cloud and Cloudflare. Then October 20th was AWS, which I think everybody remembers. Azure had a slight downtime on October 29th. And then November 18th, which is the most recent one, was the Cloudflare just massive mess up. That's the one I think most people associate with Cloudflare anyway. So, and they all went down for different reasons, but the Google Cloud one was just interesting, I think, because it was like, I can't remember how it actually happened. I'm going to have to read up on it, but it was like I think it was a policy, right? And then there's like a replication issue, and it's sort of, it was like a knock-on effect in one of their environments. But it was weird, and just took out a lot of the internet, because a lot of the internet relies on the cloud these days. And not only that, it took out parts of AWS because of it didn't take out parts of AWS, but like parts of AWS were affected because of services that I guess are interlinked. And so that was kind of interesting as well. But what was your favorite?
Okay, so my top two. I mean, first of all, whilst we're talking about it, yes, you mentioned things like policy changes. What I find interesting is when you look about all these outages, not just cloud outages, but general outages, like you had all in various platforms across the last year to 2 years, and they've all been a lot of them have been down to like really small changes in config files or changes in how a database works. It's caused problems with replication, or it's had some kind of knock-on effect for some seemingly minor thing that you would love to think would be caught before it got into live. And it's that kind of fragility that is just incredibly amazing. So the other thing, my top two. My first one is Azure. I noted that down. This is my number one because there was another one recently in the tail end of November. Sorry. First one was in October, one you mentioned. There was another small one at the tail end of November over, I don't know if it's just UK affecting, but what happened was some of what was interesting to me was that some of the SOCs that we communicate with and sort of have relationships with, let's just say that, and the people we're communicating with at the time, they started to put messages out along the lines of, there's an Azure outage at the moment, it's inhibiting our ability to do X, Y, Z. And you sort of dug a little bit deeper and asked them some questions. You're like, how much is that limiting you? Like if you've got all of your EDR stack basically in Azure, it's all reporting back through like Sentinel, and you're basically relying on Azure. How much does Azure affect you if there is an outage like that? It's like, well, Response back from several of them was, yeah, we're basically dark at that stage, which is an incredibly worrying prospect for a SOC, if I'm honest. I don't know if there's been like some big knock-on effects at various companies for that exact same thing, but that for me gets my number one spot, because it's that sort of, there's outages that affect the general public, and it's just like, oh yeah, X is down. That's a minor inconvenience. So I'll go on Instagram or something for a little bit and entertain myself. And then there's like the bit where it's actually inhibiting other cybersecurity services, and it's preventing things from working that should be working. Like, it's affecting telemetry, it's affecting reporting, it's affecting monitoring. And at that point, I think it gets like considerably more scary for me. So that gets my top spot, I think.
What was your second one?
My second one was Cloudflare.
The most recent?
Yeah, it's got to be the most recent one, because it was huge. And it was my favourite part about that was when he started going to all the sites that monitor uptime and things like that, and they too were affected.
Down detector went down. It was great.
Yeah. The irony of that.
I mean, you'd think, right, that a site that's supposed to be, able to see when other sites are down would itself not be connected to like the cloud.
Well, yeah, but I think people just over time haven't thought about that use case. Like, oh, what happens if our security tooling, what happens if our denial of service protection goes down one day? I don't think people have thought about resiliency in that way for quite some time. I think resiliency for a lot of people has always been, historically you have primary backup physical tin servers, and then now we have sort of different zones within the different regions and things like that in cloud environments, and that's considered our backup, our resiliency. But what about the stuff we put in front of that we farm out to other people? That's often the bit that has caused problems recently, like your Cloudflares and things. It's not the actual service is down. The service is working fine behind the scenes. It's just no one can get to it. So it's very fragile and very publicly funny. Yeah.
Yeah. And the Cloudflare one was, correct me if I'm wrong, it was a log file that, because of a policy change, was basically just growing too large. And then there was some replication, and the replication caused denial of service, and then the entire thing went down. I think that was right. Yeah,
replication caused too large. But
yeah.
Speaking.
It was. It's basically log files and policy files have caused going back to even before last year, even before 2025, like the CrowdStrike one, which wasn't really internet. Like, how to rephrase this? It didn't affect like critical internet infrastructure, but it affected critical infrastructure for multiple internet-based companies. So, and that was again a policy, and it's just these weird things where I guess we've just forgotten that you should never, or you should always test in QA, like before deploying to production. Like, because like that was literally that. They just deployed straight to production without actually testing it, which is insane. And and immediately caused an outage. And the Google Cloud one was very similar. It was I was reading up on it. There was a policy change, which was sort of it was code that triggered under certain conditions, but when they deployed it as a policy, it wasn't triggered automatically. And then suddenly something changed in an environment, it was triggered, and it introduced these like blank fields into a bunch of tables, which knock-on effect sort of caused null pointer dereferences. And that took everything in. But again, it's like, it's one of those things where like, surely, I mean, and this might just be me being slightly naive. Like, has the infrastructure grown so complicated and so complex that it's just impossible to test stuff in pre-prod? Like,
yeah, so this is...
That's a valid question, I guess. And it might be the case, like, that in some of these instances, can you test stuff in pre-prod, or do you just have to hope?
So this is actually a really interesting point about stuff getting so complicated and so big and vast nowadays. Is that, and we've seen this in our. You said right at the beginning, 15 years we've been in cybersecurity, which is feels like a long time, but realistically, it's not a huge amount of time. But then on the other hand, at the rate of like technology changing, that's a huge amount of time. Things have changed vastly just in our time of pen testing, red teaming, researching, whatever you want to call it. And it's. I came across this conversation when I was delivering a talk the other day to a company, and they've got the most complex environment you can ever imagine. And we got a good relationship with them because way back when we did a load of incident response for them when they had a ransomware attack. And I can remember going back to that time when that incident happened, that when that did happen, we ended up spending a lot of time going through all of their different technology stacks. And they've got Kubernetes clusters over here and like a billion different regions. And you've got AWS over here, you've got Azure over here, and you've got like developers at your main head office spinning up stuff via Terraform scripts. And you're like, it's just got so complicated, and the infrastructure and the estate has just grown so large that when you sit down to do some forensics on it, you're like, well, who owns this bit? Who do I need to talk to get access to this bit to do the actual forensics? And there's this point where things have got so complicated. And even internally at some of these companies like CrowdStrike, like your Fortinets, etc., their products and their product base is so vastly complicated now that, I can imagine it is quite, I'm sure they'd say it wasn't, but I can imagine it being quite easy for things to slip the net. And the level of like due diligence you'd have to go through to make sure it doesn't is insanely large. I mean, you could argue, yes, they given their position, they probably should be going to that level of due diligence, right? But I imagine the products have got so vastly complicated now with so many developers with lots of fingers in different pies that it's maybe got a bit out of control, almost. Very hard to manage.
Yeah. The CrowdStrike one, I have less sympathy for, purely because it was such a small policy update, and I feel like they could have literally just run it through. I know their argument was like, well, we want to get these things out as quickly as possible. Yeah. Because it's like new detection rules for new exploits and stuff, which is fair, but at the same time, it's like, I mean, you took down most of the internet, not most of the internet, you took down most computers. Yeah. Like, there were a ridiculous amount of computers. And you could have just run it through a simple QA network and it would have literally been detected. They even admitted as much. So that I have significantly less sympathy for. But I can imagine when you have sort of like a massive cloud network and it might even be that like the different areas are configured differently. So like, do you duplicate every single zone at a smaller scale? I mean, maybe, but it seems like it's a slightly different scale, because ultimately CrowdStrike is a thing that runs on one computer, right? And with like cloud networks, they're entire massive sprawling networks. So there's probably more stuff that can go wrong, especially with like replication issues. I mean, I might be wrong, but that's my take on it.
I think for me, the underlying, we could probably debate a load of stuff all day, but the underlying thing for me out of all of this is I think that the technology we're using is emerging and changing so rapidly and so quickly. And I don't know if everyone is thinking through use cases and cases where things fall over and flop over and die at the same sort of pace that things are growing at. So it's harder to think out all of these different use cases and put catches in for all of them as we're growing again. I think we're living through that phase of learning that things are held together by little bits of Velcro, and then like that. The nice thing is a lot of these companies have learned from these and put things in place so this sort of stuff can't happen again out the back of it. And I think we're sort of living through that learning phase almost, where these companies are going, it's a bit fragile really, and we've just sort of pissed off on our massive development rant over here. I built a load of stuff and not really kept pace with like all of our QA and stuff like that. So I think we're living through that phase of learning, but people are going through with all these stacks and stacks of technology, but we're ramping up. And the security product market is now huge. It's unbelievably massive, to the point where it's flooded with so many complicated products, and those products for big players within it are just pushing more and more sort of things onto the end users as they possibly can. Like I've lost count of how many different products some of these companies have. And when I look through like their solutions page on their websites, you get lost with like what some of it is. You're like, you start reading it and going, I'm pretty sure I've just read that on your last product. And it just seems to do the same thing. You've just given it another name.
Sounds slightly different.
Yeah. You start tearing it back. It's like, oh, so it's just a VPN. Oh, right. So I made like this big song and dance about it. Like, oh, okay. Perfect. So yeah, I think there's a lot of that going on as well. So yes, we shall see.
One thing I do like about these is the write-ups that come after them. Like every single instance, I believe, there's been like, I mean, all these platforms have blogs.
Yeah.
But there's been like a quite nice diagnosis of like what went down, how they, and I don't know why, but it made me think, and this happened, oh goodness, I want to say probably 10 years ago now. It might be less than 10 years, but do you remember when GitLab deleted a database?
Yeah. Wow.
I can't remember when that was. It feels like it has to be 10 years ago-ish.
Yeah.
It was quite a long time ago. But GitLab, not GitHub, but GitLab, which is a competitor, had an issue. I honestly don't, it's so long ago I don't remember the exact details, but it was something about they deleted a primary database server by mistake. Like, literally just deleted it. And what was interesting about that is their response. I at the time I recognized it was a really interesting and unique response because they had a bunch of their developers and sysadmins streaming live on, like, I don't think it was Twitch, but it was live on some streaming platform, and they just streamed their recovery efforts, which was like, it's such an interesting way of doing it to see like, oh, it's recovery in real time, but it was super open. And it just made me think of that because, like, every time we have one of these outages now, there's like live tweets about certain things, but then you get this lovely blog post written up before. But I have to say, like, I feel like GitLab were one of the first bigger companies to sort of do something where they were like, proactively be like, this is what we're doing for recovery, and here we go. Here's like not a live blog, literally a live stream. But yeah, it just made me think of that.
I think
that's quite good.
I think they've been kind of strong-armed into that position in a number of ways because a lot of these security tools and security vendors have blog posts to talk about security stuff. Like, obviously they do, new vulnerabilities, how they're protecting against it, and it's all a little bit sort of backslappy and self-promotional. But generally speaking, if you want some good information about a recently released CV and how it affects stuff, a lot of them do have decent blogs and technical coverage over them. But you can't then be seen to be writing stuff about other vendors and other people's faux pas and then not doing the same for your own. It would be massively hypocritical. So I think I like the fact they do it. Yeah, I think they've probably been strong-armed into it, but I think it's valuable that they do it. And what pains me about some of the big incidents and breaches you see across the spectrum of a year is some of them I think you will just never see the light of day in terms of a write-up on what actually happened throughout that entire incident, which leaves you with I don't exactly know when this will release, but at the current time of recording, all of the Jaguar Land Rover stuff that's happened over in the UK, for example, super interesting breach. And again, I've done talks on the breach as well because it is interesting. And when you start reading all of the blog posts about it from some very reputable sort of incident response firms, even and places like that, what it comes down to a lot of the time still at the end of it is essentially guesswork based on like known TTPs, like techniques and like previous history of those groups and their sort of modus operandi. Yeah, and just building up what they think has happened from that. I'm saying it in a very sort of authoritative tone. And as we know, if you say anything with an authoritative tone in the internet world, it just becomes law, apparently. So there's a lot of acting going on. And then you sort of strip it back and go, well, actually, they haven't actually come out and said anything properly about it. They haven't detailed the technical details of all the incidents from end to end. People are still going, yeah, it's probably social engineering and vishing because Scattered Spider were involved. It's like, well, yeah, but there were like two other groups that were involved as well. So it might have not been. What was really cool about that was a bit slightly off topic, but there were the threat actor posted loads of screenshots on dark web forums and things, and it was quite entertaining because they posted things like their like directories they've been dropped into after like post exploitation and things like that. And a lot of these screenshots have things like the Sapsoft directory. So you start doing a bit of enumeration behind that and you sort of go, Sapsoft NetWeaver, they had a load of vulnerabilities not so long ago. And then you go, well, one of the groups involved in this has just released a bunch of like proof of concept code for Sapsoft NetWeaver exploits, like literally the month before they compromised Jaguar Land Rover. You're sort of putting two and two together, like going, maybe it wasn't just phishing. Maybe it's like some other stuff involved as well. And everyone's just sort of piecing together all of these like theories, which are all, pretty valid. Most of them. Some of them were wild. Some of them are written up on LinkedIn using ChatGPT, very obviously. The second you get a security bulletin that is talking authoritatively about something, and it has emojis to describe the feeling of them, like exfiltration via VPN, and like a rocket emoji next to it, and you're like, yeah, that's it's probably not that legit, is it? But it is interesting, and I wish they would provide write-ups, but because people would learn so much from them, frankly. But I think a lot of those sorts of companies probably won't. It'll probably go away, and everyone will forget about it in a few months' time. And we'll never know none the wiser. I would just end up piecing together things through from random theories, which is, complete opposite to what these security companies are doing and writing everything up, which is where I wish everyone was at, really.
Well, I mean, the cloud companies aren't even really security companies. I think they just do it because they have. It's kind of expected of them, I guess, but also like 'cause they're just that big. But it's also, I feel like they just have a bunch of people who are passionate enough to like document everything, and I feel like it's kind of they don't have to do it. Like they could just release a blog post that said, we had a downtime. It was related to a policy change. We fixed it. But there's sort of I don't know.
I guess
it's just expected these days. I think for if you're a big enough company and you have that kind of impact, like people will just hound you until you tell them what happened.
There's a resource constraint as well, isn't there? Which is if you got the resources to do it, then great. And I guess Google have a lot of resources, and Amazon,
yes, and Microsoft, and Cloudflare,
probably CrowdStrike too.
Yeah. So. I mean, that was cloud outages. The other thing that happened, this happened again. Honestly, most of these happened towards the end of the year, like the latter half. The NPM Wormy Boys.
NPM Wormy Boys, which sounds a bit like the Beastie Boys, like some kind of
the Wormy Boy
80s, 90s.
I'm gonna have to make a Suno song that's the Beastie Boys but Wormy Boys now. Okay, I'm gonna be on that after
this. Thank you. At the very least, I expect a sticker.
So this might be for me like the top, like my personal top cybersecurity news story of this year. And I mean, I'm not really that into supply chain attacks. I mean, to the point where anyone is that into them, but like obviously they've been happening at an increasing rate. So much so that OWASP put them on the top 10, which we're going to have an episode ranting about OWASP at some point in season 2 as well. But for whatever reason, anyway, they're in the top 10 now. Supply chain attacks are, I mean, it's so similar to like the cloud issues. Like everybody has their environment in the cloud these days. So when the cloud has an outage, everyone's environment goes offline. Supply chain attacks is extremely similar in the fact that everybody uses libraries that in some cases are depending on other libraries that are depending on other, and it's like a massive, it's libraries all the way down. And then it only takes one of those libraries to be compromised, malicious code inserted, like published into the upstream, and then it's distributed when everybody does a build, and suddenly it's like everywhere, and now you have like a massive supply chain attack. So already there's, they've been a big issue because of libraries and automated distribution of libraries, which is probably a mistake. I get that it's useful to be able to like, it's crazy because we've been like, everyone should update their libraries. Like that's been our advice in security for years, like keep your libraries up to date. And now it's almost like kinda keep your libraries up to date, but maybe don't keep them that up to date. maybe sort of lag them a bit. So that maybe like update to like a month prior to the latest release, and then we'll see if there's any malicious code that's been discovered, and if there is, then don't update. But so already that supply chain attacks are kind of interesting. The NPM worms are just fascinating because it's such a clever idea.
Yeah,
it's almost crazy that nobody's thought of it before now. Like we went for literally years with supply chain attack after supply chain attack using even NPM. And then finally we get to this stage where somebody had it's a genius idea. They're obviously malicious, they're bad, they're attackers, they're not good people. It's still a genius idea. I think we have to recognize that. That, as along with compromising some kind of library, your malicious code looks around the system for publisher keys to other NPM libraries and then copies itself into those libraries and then pushes those up to NPM. It's just genius. It really is. There's no other word to describe it, because it's just such a clever mechanism for distributing your own malicious code that sort of guarantees that you don't necessarily have to target a well-used library. You just have to target a library that is used. And that's so much easier because there are so many developers out there who probably don't update their libraries that often because they're already sort of in a near perfect state, right? There are libraries that do X and it's such a simple thing. Like, arguably, does it have to be a library? Maybe, maybe not. But it's a library and it does one thing and it does it really well. That's why people use it. But you don't have to target a massively popular library. You can target just a single library, and that library is used in some other library, right? It's a dependency, and that library might be popular, or library might not be popular, but that's used by another library. And it just has to reach that single popular library that's dependent on a dependent on a dependent of the one you've initially infected. And suddenly everything's just chaos. And you have like this worm spreading through NPM. And it's happened twice now. Yeah. And by the time this episode airs, it might have happened more than twice. It's entirely possible that by the time this episode airs, which should be the first or second week of January 2026, we're sat here right now in December recording this, and there's only been 2. Entirely possible there could be 3 or 4.
Absolutely. I've got a few opinions on this one. And my first is that I remember writing an article about a year and a half to 2 years ago about supply chains and essentially package managers for various, not specifically NPM, but various, because there's a number of different copycats, right? I mean, I can see this problem happening other places as well. And at the time, we were talking about not specifically what's happened with NPM. I agree, that's genius. But at the time, we were talking about, it was kind of in vogue then to publish packages with very similar names to existing very popular packages in the hope that someone would go, well, I'll download that one. Even though that one's got 1 million downloads, I'll go for this one that's got 4 for some reason. And that one would just be...
It's not like typo squatting, right, as well? Like accidentally making a typo.
It's exactly that. You're just hoping that someone one day just picks up the random one that is malicious. And the argument at the time was, well, what are all these... let's just call them marketplaces. That's a kind of global term for all of this stuff. Repositories. What are they doing to filter all of this stuff and check every single package? And the argument was that, is that even possible? Because the amount of submissions you get on a daily basis for different packages for doing minor things like, I don't know, like colouring fonts in pretty colours, like it's impossible to go through all of those at the rate that they're uploaded at, filter out everything and be 100% accurate that it contains 0 malicious code all of the time, 100%. There might be a space where that's a lot more possible these days, a couple of years on. There's a lot that's changed in the world. The dreaded AI word, which we won't go into. So, it was a problem back then. And I like this kind of fresh take on it, and you're right, it is genius, and I love it, because I was talking to some people about
I love it and hate it. Let me be very clear. I love it and hate it.
Love it.
I love how clever it is. I hate that it happens. It's not a good thing.
Yeah, not a good thing it happened, but I love how simple it is, and the elegance of the attack vector is actually really cool, because in terms of mitigating factors for it, there's only so many things you can do to protect yourself against it, which is the really clever part. Because I remember when the first round of it came around, talking to some people about, how do we mitigate this properly? And the conversation at the time was all, well, these are all of the IOCs that have been published by various incident response firms. We'll just go around, hoover up all those IOCs, and we'll just look out for bad packages. It's like, well, yeah, it's quite reactive, that, isn't it, really? By the time that's happened, this is all done. And so the beauty of the whole NPM stuff was it all happened in like post-install scripts as well, wasn't it? So it's not even the fact of like, you can't even catch it in like CI/CD processes further down the chain when you're sort of compiling things and merging it all together, because by that time it's too late by the time you get there. So you can't filter it out there, and you can't filter it out after it's happened or when it's happening, during when it's happening, because that's just kind of impossible. So you've got to catch it at the point of download and install by the individual developers almost, which is crazy, because then you have to do things like wrapping the install processes and using things like the tool MBQ is it that it'll wrap around the install process. Just say that package you're downloading, yes, good, it's got these known CVEs against it, probably don't want to do that. It's been in a recent breach over here, probably don't want to do that. It's only it checks things like how long it's been active for, the update's been active for. So it'll go, this update just happened 2 days ago. You probably don't want to install that just in case, sort of thing. It gives you kind of like a risk rating, and then you can choose whether to install or not install. So things like that are elegant, but then that puts the onus kind of squarely on the individual developers and what they're doing, which is difficult to manage. So yeah, it's quite a nice little system they've come up for compromising stuff, really. Which it's going to change the way I think we think about supply chain independencies long term, and how we manage and mitigate that risk longer term. And it's going to require a bit of thinking, because we're targeting the actual developers on their developer machines now. We're not targeting so much the code and the process comes out the other end. Like the big bang happens before that, so you gotta catch it before that, which is kind of a problem. The other beautiful thing is I'm waving my pen frantically because this excites me.
For those not watching the YouTube, yes. Swifty has a pen. Yeah. He is waving it rather threateningly at me.
So listen up. Yeah, the other cool thing from the incident response point of view, that's obviously kind of my world sort of side of things. The other really nice thing is that it's quite hard to detect as well, because by doing it all through NPM and post-install scripts and the tools and services you end up calling through that to extract things like keys, passwords, secrets, etc., they're all kind of legitimate tools. So it's quite hard to flag it as like a malicious process happening, because it interferes and correlates so directly with legitimate processes, software, and behavior that it becomes quite hard to distinguish. So you end up with quite a high, at the moment anyway, false positive ratio if you try and run to it too aggressively. So yeah, it takes a lot of fine tuning to get to that stage, that sort of perfect nirvana in the middle where you can control what developers are doing and monitor what they're doing, which is goes down really well with developers usually. So
I mean, I've always been of the opinion that Node.js was just a mistake generally. So I just feel very vindicated. Like JavaScript was already a hack for like browsers, and then they decided to put it on the server, and they thought that was a good idea. Like server-side JavaScript never made it. So I'm always just very smug on like Node.js. And we're talking right now because like literally a few days ago, React has a massive unauthenticated RCE. Yeah. So we're not going to cover any of that. But yeah, NPM Wormy Boys, I think top story in cybersecurity of 2025 for me personally, just because supply chain attack plus. Like they were already bad, and then they were like, oh, let's just make them into a worm, because of course.
Why not? It's nice. But what these two things, so the cloud outages and this do have in common, apart from the stuff you mentioned earlier, is this process of realizing how fragile it all is and this sort of learning period we're going through. I'll go back to that again because it's the same thing here. Everyone's now looking at package managers and at supply chain and going, right, how can we better secure that and how can we work around that? Because this is just something we frankly haven't looked at in too much detail before. And it was quite funny when there were some people on X just pointing towards tools like MPQ, like I mentioned, that wraps around the npm installer, which is fabulous. And someone came up with like this copycat tool as well that someone posted around. It's like, yeah, look at this is amazing. And the original author of MPQ came forward. He was like, yeah, I wrote that like 10 years ago. So yeah, it's just become a lot more relevant.
Yeah. I wonder if anyone's written a malicious wrapper around npm that just lies. It's just like, it works. It does exactly the right job for most of the packages, but it has like a hard-coded list of packages that are also malicious but owned by the developer of the wrapper.
I noticed you're using this version of that font library. I've got this handy version over here that's way more secure and tested. Would you like to install that instead? Yes.
I mean, it's a valid question, like, because who do you even trust? And that's the other thing about all this, like, there are so many libraries just like written by practically anonymous people.
Yeah, open
that are and it's obviously it's one of the dangers with open source. Yeah. One of the nice things about open source is that you can view the code. The issue with that is nobody ever does. Like that's the problem. And now, but now I mean, and we'll have to mention the AI word. Now maybe AI will be able to actually do some reviews of all of this code. Maybe we'll see. But
you're absolutely right.
We have to. Yeah. Is this code secure? I was like, yes, it is. Actually, there was an error here. You're absolutely right. I'll double check.
Thanks, AI.
We do have to get on to the third story.
We do.
Otherwise, this podcast is going to be extremely long.
It will be extremely long.
And this is yours. I want you to talk about your baby. This is your contribution to this list.
My baby. My dog's called...
Talk about how much you hate Fortinet.
Oh, right, not my dog. Okay. He's taken himself off. I don't know if you saw it. Those watching YouTube might see him appear down here. He got bored and just walked off. He's not a problem now. But yeah, man. So, right, I'm going to start this off with a caveat because I think that all security tools, no matter what category you put them in, your Fortinets, your CrowdStrikes, your Palo Altos, anything that firewall, EDR, endpoint, anything, whatever it is, but they all kind of have a responsibility and they all have telemetry, and a lot of these vulnerabilities and a lot of their use cases and how good someone perceives it as usually comes down to how well configured and how well tweaked and who is actually watching and monitoring the alerts and acting on stuff at the other end. It's often not so much the technology stack itself, more about how it's being used, I often find. So any of these things, they do generally have that sort of caveat around them of going, well, yeah, there's a vulnerability in like this administration interface. Why have you got it facing the internet though? That's just silly. That's like 101 stuff you just don't do in case this very incident happens. So yeah, that's my caveat. A lot of this comes down to configuration and people's wild misconfigurations that just enable these attacks further than they should be. My second point is, yes, Fortinet seems to have this uncanny knack of identifying or having vulnerabilities identified for it, but are incredibly basic, like the things we see in labs almost. And it's not even as if it takes like a lot of research sometimes to find these things. Like they are sometimes basic buffer overflows. The FortiWeb one that we just saw, like not long before this has been recorded, was literally a directory traversal vulnerability, which is absolutely ridiculous. And there is another one coming out very soon, which will have been released by the time this gets released anyway, but is, again, another pretty simple issue that they've got with single sign-on and not sanitizing tokens and basically allowing a SSO bypass to happen on a management interface. It's just like all this stuff is just such like 101 stuff to evade, and it is such a problem for Fortinet in terms of like the rate they keep finding these at. There's also their disclosure policy that kind of is the cause of a lot of debate around the industry as well. And it depends what side of it you fall onto. And I haven't quite worked out which side of the fence I fall onto. Maybe you can comment and choose a side of the fence. But they have this policy: if something is identified or flagged to them, they will release it internally first to all of their customers. They'll send out notifications about it, a few basic details about, this bypass has happened here, it's got this CVSS score, we're fixing it, the fix is on the way. And they won't say anything publicly until 2-3 weeks down the line, so it gives everyone a chance to sort of patch, prepare and release, etc. And get their house in order, I guess. And there's lots of people that seem to be in cybersecurity community that say, well, just put it out there anyway, just broadcast it so everyone's aware of it. But, Fortinet have their own opinion over that, about it enabling attackers and things like that. And the counter-argument to that is then that, but it's already being exploited and attacked at the moment because we've got evidence of these attacks happening on honeypots. So we know it's literally happening at the moment. Being all quiet, coy and shy about it is sometimes not productive. So I don't quite know which side I fall on of that. I can see that what they're doing is in good faith. I don't think they're trying to obfuscate things purposefully. I can see the good that can come out of that. But on the flip side of it, if it's already being exploited, sometimes I don't really see the point of being too protective over that information.
I think it all goes back to why responsible disclosure. Like, why do we do responsible disclosure? And ultimately, it's to protect users, right?
Yeah.
If they're informing all of their customers, then that's responsible disclosure. Like, why the world... if you don't use Fortinet, you don't need to know about a thing that's affecting Fortinet.
Yeah.
That's the thing. So I actually think that's a perfectly reasonable way of doing disclosure, is to tell all the actual people who are affected by it first, and then a few weeks later telling the world. I don't see an issue with that at all. Like, I think you got to remember why responsible disclosure exists. It's so that people who could potentially be affected know about it. But in this case, they're telling all the people who could potentially be affected by it. So it's like, there's no different, like, they're doing it. And I see their point, like, they don't want necessarily attackers to be able to know about this, like, immediately. And it might just be a few, like, groups that are exploiting it. If you do release that information, that's potentially more groups that could be exploiting it. So it does make some sense to keep it slightly semi-private. I mean, there's also the counter-argument that how many of these threat actor groups work for companies surreptitiously that have Fortinet products and just get the information anyway. Yeah. Like, didn't we see, like, recently, I say recently, this will be like a few months by the time this episode airs, wasn't there a ransomware operator who worked for a company that sold a service to negotiate with ransomware operators? Wasn't that a recent thing? I'm pretty sure like 2 of them were recently arrested. Like, and their part of their job was negotiating with ransomware operators, but they were ransomware operators. People forget, like, threat actors aren't just threat actors aren't people in, their parents' basements.
No.
There are threat actors who are working at big companies.
Well,
so
yeah. I don't know.
That's the problem.
I don't know if you saw, like, the other day, Russian Panda put out an interview she did with a ransomware threat actor, which is quite cool. They had like a huge voice filter on when they're talking. My immediate thought was straight, is it Ali?
It was Ali, wasn't it? It was goddamn Ali
again. I was half expecting her to, like, I'll mask herself halfway through. Like, hey, surprise, got you as well. But but it was a really interesting. If you haven't watched it, you can find a YouTube video. It's incredibly fun to listen to and watch, just how sort of carefree some of these ransomware operators are. But he was alluding to the fact that, like, over in Russia, some of these groups have literal offices they go to. So it's not even like kids in a basement anymore. They have offices, and he's like, yeah, we've got departments in these offices as well, of, like, people that do initial access brokering. They're weird. We don't talk to them. And it's like, so mad. It's just so mad.
Ransomware operator office politics. It's just such a weird
It's absolutely mental. I mean, it's just like, well, what do you do? Do you feel guilty? Do you feel like you're being watched? Or if it's like, nah, just go down the gym afterwards. It's all good. And but pretty much the moral of the story is like, Daddy Putin's got our back, so therefore we don't need to like worry.
Right.
It's not exactly illegal over here because we're hacking American and British companies. So why should I watch my back? It was just really insightful. But yeah, do go and have a look at that.
Definitely.
I don't quite know how this relates back to Fortinet, but I mean, yeah,
it was mostly about responsible disclosure. I agree with the way Fortinet's doing it. I think it probably does minimize some damage, potentially.
Yeah.
I don't know. Ultimately, if they weren't telling customers, trying to keep it under wraps, that would be bad. But the fact is, if they're telling their customers, then they're being responsible. There's no necessity for every single person on the planet to know about a particular Fortinet exploit. There just isn't. In an ideal world, maybe, but ultimately there's no point. The people who need to know, and that's all that matters to me, really.
Yeah, I think there is this ongoing battle, isn't there, really, between people that need to know and people that want to know. And I think the internet and social media in particular is littered with lots of cybersecurity influencers, researchers, and people that are just generally interested in the industry who want to know. And
I want to know. I would love to know, because we're offensive security professionals.
Yeah.
We could potentially use that on engagements. Absolutely, I want to know. I don't need to know.
No. Yeah, that's the thing.
Do I have to wait a few weeks for a proof of concept? Oh, bother.
Yeah.
I mean, it sucks, but ultimately I see the value in what they're doing. So I'm fine with that. I mean, people can debate me in the comments. Maybe I'm just completely wrong about it.
So someone will. Someone will have the counter opinion of, they should release everything as and when because it's already being exploited. Doesn't make much difference is the opinion. But I mean, personally, I think I'm leaning to the other side of the fence. And yeah, if you can minimize,
I've convinced you.
You have convinced me. And I think if you can minimize someone's pain in a situation, why not do it? Because if you're doing anything else than minimizing pain and you're not minimizing blast radius, frankly, what the fuck are you doing? You're just making the world a worse place. And why? As a security vendor who's meant to be making things better, why would you do that? So it turns out this was meant to be a rant about Fortinet. I've actually ended up praising them. So that's a good turnaround, isn't it? But no,
we're going to release the calendar, right?
Yes,
we need to make a calendar.
The calendar. So
maybe it'll be released by the time this episode has aired. But Swift had the idea about a month ago now that there's enough CVEs. There's at least one massive critical CVE for Fortinet every month of 2025 that we could just release a calendar for 2026 based on all of those.
I'm still doing it because the only thing we were missing is I first came up with this idea in November. We were sort of sitting around just going, December. What if we don't get one in December? Then our calendar won't be complete. We'll just have to have a holding page at the end. If I don't know.
And not only did we get one, we got one at the start of December. So we have time to make the calendar.
There's still time for a better one to come along. But yeah, this is my point to them, really. I don't the other part of my rant about Fortinet is just they've got so many bugs in their software, and they are such basic bugs over and over again. They are not difficult things to fix or evaded in terms of modern day coding practice. I just don't understand how they've got down some of these holes they've got down. It's good they are.
It's AI. No, it's not.
It's good they're fixing them, and it's good they're publicly fixing them. It's good they're protecting their clients at doing them, but I think first of all, I think their detection capabilities for a lot of stuff is meh at best. But second to that, when your actual security product is once a month becoming the target for the actual compromise of the device, that is a problem. So I think they've got a fantastic product if they manage to sort all of these problems out, but you can't even say teething problems because Fortinet's been a company for a very long time now. It just seems a little bit odd that they're getting this many over and over again. So please, Fortinet, if you are listening, get your stuff together, because I want to praise you because you do some good things. You also do just a lot of mental things. I just wish you didn't. So there is that. Oh, the other thing is there's a reason I wrote them and started speaking about the Russian Panda stuff is because in that interview, he actually sits there and says, well, what security tool are you I can't remember the exact phrase she used, but basically, what security tool are you just really happy to see when you break in somewhere? And then their number one was like, well, my advice to people would be to install Fortinet because it earns us a lot of money. It's like when you've got endorsements from ransomware groups, like literally endorsing your products because it's easy for them. That's a problem. That's a marketing problem right there. So a lot of work to do. I think they do a lot of things. Actually, retrospectively, you convinced me a lot of things right, but there's just still a lot of wrong and a lot of interesting ways to go. I will publish my calendar just because it's fun, and I hope I can't publish one in what would be 2027 in a year's time. I hope we're not sitting here in a year's time doing a year in 2026 review
and forcing it again on the list. We
come back and we start talking about 12 new CVSS 10 scoring behemoths every month. So thank you for listening to my rant about Fortinet and for changing my mind about a few things.
You're welcome.
Huzzah.
And hey, hopefully we've got a whole year of great episodes of this podcast for you to listen to. Thank you so much if you've been listening throughout 2025.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of new people listening as well, so it's nice to see people. And we'll keep going through 2026. Looking forward to it. We've got a lot of cool interviews coming up as well, haven't we, actually, with people?
We do.
There's new OWASP stuff to talk about. Yeah, it's going to be a good year already, so I can't wait.
So much stuff.
Yeah. And I'm going to DEF CON again. Yay! So
yes,
there is that to talk about.
We'll have a DEF CON episode at some point as well.
A live one, maybe. Whoa.
Maybe.
Recorded in my hotel bedroom. Anyway, right.
Well, thank you so much again for listening. I've been Tiberius. He's been Andy Swift. This has been Across the Pondcast. You can find all of our social media links in the episode description or on acrossthepondcast.net. And we will see you next time.
Take care. Goodbye.